bookshop, it's the bookshop, it's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It is Sam Pfeifle, your host of John Updike's Ghost, your favorite little podcast about reading, literature, bookstores, all things awesome. This is episode 61, and I am joined for the 61st time by the co-owner of the bookshop of Beverly Farms and I would say world traveler, Hannah Harlow. How are you doing, Hannah?
Great. I'm prepping for a trip to Los Angeles later today. So I'm a traveler. I don't know about world. It's been a while since I got out of the country, but
pretty far over there.
It's
you were
fun.
in Portugal not that long ago.
Less than 2 years ago.
Been to the Winter Institute since the last time we talked. There's going to be lots of book talks. But one thing that we have decided to do here on the John Updike's podcast, where we learn things very quickly, is here in the 61st episode, we're going to tell you at the beginning, right now, which books we are going to talk about today. So I am going to talk about two books that I have been reading. I have switched completely from my comfort reads back into the heavy-duty literature. And I have finished Colson Whitehead's Crook Manifesto, which I don't know why it took me so long to read. I should have
took you a very long time to read that. We'll discuss later.
I should have read it long before now. And I am about 3/4 of the way through Paul Lynch's Booker Prize shortlisted book, Prophet Song, which I have many thoughts about. Which two books are you going to talk about today?
So interesting that you have read Prophet Song. The two books I am going to talk about, they're both kind of the genre wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
One is called The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard, which is coming out at the end of February. So just in another week or two.
Okay.
And the second book is an older book called Earth Abides by George R. Stewart.
Not George R.R. Martin.
Not George R.R. Martin.
That's
not
where
George
I thought you were
C.
going.
Scott.
And I was like,
I keep wanting to say George C. Scott for some reason. No, this was a book. We'll go into it later, but it was published in 1949, and it is a kind of future, like post-apocalyptic novel.
I like it. The post-apocalyptic novels from the 40s and 50s are fun. But first, let's talk a little bit about the Winter Institute. It must have been worth something if it got you to go to Cincinnati in February, which I can't really think of any other reasons to go to Cincinnati in February. You have gone there. Tell us a little bit what you have learned about the state of the bookselling industry.
So the conference is called Winter Institute. It's hosted by the American Bookseller Association. It is a show for booksellers. So there were 900 booksellers in attendance. And
is that legal? It's legal to have 900 booksellers in the same place?
It's legal. More legal than having 6 women live in the same house in Vermont, which would be considered a brothel. So you can have 900 booksellers in the same place for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like just first and foremost, it's like really wonderful to be in the same place with so many booksellers, because it kind of reminds you of like why we do this. Everyone's gets really pumped up. And
it doesn't devolve into commiseration. That's what I would worry about.
There's some commiseration, but I think like for the most part, like, I don't know, people are kind of blowing smoke up my ass, like about like the work I do as a bookseller, because there's a lot of like, we're heroes, blah, blah, blah. And
You're on the front lines of literature.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely. And I absolutely believe in the work that we're doing, but sometimes it seemed a little much. Mm-hmm. And I think, there are people at this conference who are in Texas, they are in Florida, and they are fighting for the state of literature to exist in those places.
Not everywhere. Not everyone is in Tony Beverly Farms, where people generally agree that literature is good. Yes.
Yeah. So there were times where I felt a little bit like a phony, where I was like, I'm not, I don't know. But it's, there were all these education sessions. There were keynote speakers with big authors. There were some business authors that, maybe didn't speak to us in the same way.
Hannah is chuckling because she wouldn't let me make fun of one of the business authors in our newsletter. I was censored. He
was such a sweet man that I felt bad making fun of him, even though there was a lot of like
I'm sorry, that
gobbledygook.
was word salad. I was like, these are not words that go together. Come on.
This guy who like turned around and made this kind of failing women's fashion business a success. And he did it in really interesting ways. And I think we were supposed to see ways that could help us think about our business. And yes, maybe there were some ways.
One of the things that I liked is he's like, maybe you could be kind to people. That would be a business tactic.
I mean,
Like,
that was
don't
his
be a
thing.
jerk.
Like,
Yeah.
can we practice conscious capitalism instead of American capitalism, which is every man for himself and like greed, both
Sure. Yeah. Conscious.
to me for
That's okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, there were lots of author events where we learned about a lot of spring books.
All right.
Yeah.
Here it is. Tell me the book that you didn't know about before the Winter Institute that now you are jazzed about. You were thinking to yourself, I did not know this book. I've not heard of this person, but I saw this person speak, or I heard about this book, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to order that book.
Yeah.
I thought I had enough preamble there that you'd be like, oh yeah, totally this one. But apparently that's a stump. It's a stump.
That was a stumper. I mean, the thing is, I've done most of my ordering already. So
Right. Yeah.
I'm the buyer for the store, right? And there are a lot of buyers who attend, but there are also a lot of like event people and just frontline booksellers and other people who aren't doing the buying. So I've already ordered for spring, and most of the books being presented were spring books.
Right.
So for me, it was like, I've heard of it, but I'm excited to hear more about it, or I'm excited to hear from that author.
Mm.
So, I mean, actually, there's a book out now by Michelle Norris, the NPR person.
Uh-huh.
And she talked about her book, which was based on this project she did called the Race Project, where people write in their 6-word stories. And she gave a presentation about that I thought was really compelling and made me pay more attention to that book, which I hadn't really paid any attention to. And it's out now. And so now I'm excited to sell it.
Okay. All right. All right. That got you around to answering the question. That's pretty good.
Well, the book I mentioned, The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard, I actually missed the session he was at, but he was there. They were talking about his book at the show, and I had just finished it. I am super jazzed about this book.
Super jazzed.
I really loved it.
Not jazzed enough to go to a session, but pretty jazzed.
I did miss that session. So he was chosen. There's this program called Indies Introduced, which is there's a panel of indie booksellers that read books, and they're all debut novels that they're reading, and they kind of pick, 5 or 6 a season. I can't remember what it is that they kind of say to their other, fellow booksellers, like, pay attention to this book. We're kind of choosing this to like pump up a little bit.
Right. So tell me about why you are so excited about this book.
So I did listen to this book, and it was a decent audiobook. I think I wish I had read it so I could have absorbed it more, but I really enjoyed it as an audiobook. And it's a speculative literary novel, is how it's described.
Speculative.
And it's about a small town in this valley.
What does speculative mean in return to literature? What does that even mean?
Speculative means like it's not real. We're like making something up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's kind of genre, but I don't know that
speculating about, so it must imply future. I'm speculating about the future, how the future might arrive.
It's a future book because it's about a town, okay, that exists. And it's a small town, and it's surrounded by mountains. It's in a valley. And to the east is the same town 20 years in the future. And to the west is the same town 20 years in the past. And it repeats.
Interesting.
Supposedly, infinity time. Just
off to the left goes 20 years, back.
Yep.
20 years, future. So we don't know which is the real time. Every time, everybody feels like they are in the real time.
That would maybe break your brain. So like, there were some times where I was reading and I was like, my brain hurts from trying to figure out like when is. So it's a time travel book.
No.
But you can, so the borders are heavily guarded by the kind of local government.
I suspect, because you could like roll next door and figure
Yes.
out the lottery numbers.
Right. But people can petition to visit either the future or the past, kind of. So mostly it's like, okay, like a loved one dies.
I want to go back in time.
I want to
and
go
see
back
my
and
mom again.
Yeah. Or like one of the petitions that you see is a man who's about to die and his daughter's pregnant and he's going to die before the grandkid is born. So he
Wants to go
gets
to
a
the
petition
future, see the
approved
kid.
to see his granddaughter. Yeah.
Little
So there's
modern.
stuff like that. They're like, and you know, so the main character, Odile, there's like an apprenticeship. She's 16 when the book starts, and she has to figure out, you know, what she's going to apply for her apprenticeship. And she applies for the conseil is what the local government is called. And so she starts studying to be this conseil. So you see her looking at some of the petitions that come through. And then it got very philosophical. And you can see how the book is kind of about like fate and free will.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you could just travel 20 years in the future and find out how it works, like that would kind of crush your free will. How would you have the will to live? I would not.
So there were a ton of these like really philosophical questions. And so halfway through the book, I went and read the author's little bio, and he studied philosophy at the University of Toronto.
Wow.
Which I knew you would find interesting because I believe your daughter is looking at the PhD program at the University of Toronto.
She is, yeah. So we were just talking about this yesterday. They're actually traveling to Toronto in 3 weeks to go check the city out, Ruby and Kristen. And she's actually decided she's not as interested in the University of Toronto's program, which is the largest philosophy program in the world. They have 100 PhD candidates. But there's like a city college of Toronto that has a philosophy program as well that she's very interested in. One of her buddies went to, and so she's getting a tour of that. But yeah, I had no idea. But Toronto is actually like the philosophy capital of the world.
So I found that really interesting of just like, you know, I have a niece who is studying philosophy, and I just thought, hey, she can become a novelist because this book is super good. And so
it's funny because
yeah.
I actually, there's a dude who teaches at Bates that I follow online, this guy, Tyler Austin. And I thought he was a philosopher, but he was actually a comparative lit major and teaches he teaches a climate fiction class that's all about like the philosophy of climate fiction.
Ooh.
Yeah. You know, I really want to like audit the class.
Yeah. So anyway, part 2, you get Odile when she's 16. Part 2, you jump 20 years in the future. And you see her, you know, now 20 years ahead. And her path is super interesting. And the ending is awesome. I'm not going to say anything more than that. Like, just, this is a really good book. Yeah.
I like it. That sounds super interesting. I did not have a genre book. Both of my books are very literary.
I thought that Prophet Song was kind of post-apocalyptic, like near future.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on how you read the state of the world. So, you know, Prophet Song it reminds me a lot of Saramago for a few different reasons. One is we don't get any paragraphs. But like, I don't know. It feels like Paul is doing a little half measure there. Instead of paragraphs, he'll put like a double M dash.
Okay.
To like, you know, let you know that like, we'll jump here. And it's like, well, how about we just use a paragraph so that we can all read, you know?
Right.
No quotation marks or anything. And it definitely just feels at times like he's purposely obfuscating meaning, which I don't like, you know, I never felt like Saramago was doing that. I do feel like Paul Lynch does this. Like, look at me, I'm writing a literary book. I will make it difficult to read, you know? And it's like, okay. I think part of why he's doing that is, you know, so it's Saramago reminds me a lot of Seeing, actually. So I don't know if people have read Blindness and Seeing, but Blindness is everybody in the town goes blind, and it's like Lord of the Flies. Seeing is everybody gets their sight back, and then the next election comes up and nobody votes. There are 0 votes cast, and like, whoa, what do you do? And so it's about like oppressive government and, you know, like, what is it to be governed and all this kind of stuff.
And I loved Blindness. I did not read Seeing.
Seeing is great. I actually really enjoyed it. So Prophet Song is like that plus like Kafka. And so it's like an oppressive state. And what I really like about it and why I think it resonates is it's like the domestic side of what happens when like the Stasi come in, right? So it's Ireland and this, fascist party is rising to power. And the main character is Eilish, like Billie Eilish. And her husband is like the second in command at the teachers union. And so the teachers union is fed up with this oppressive government not paying teachers, and they're organizing a general strike. And government says nope, and comes in and just arrests her husband, disappears him. They don't know where he is. It's been, weeks and weeks. And she's still like managing the household. Like her 17-year-old kid has a girlfriend and she has a oops baby, because they're Irish Catholic or whatever. And, they have like, Molly is this 14-year-old girl who's like being a pain in the ass teenager. And so she's trying to navigate like, where's my husband? How do, we find him? Like, how do we like resist this fascist government? And like, shit, somebody has to pick up Molly at hockey practice. And like, it's just like really, really close. And so I think the way he writes it works because you're supposed to feel this like oppressive, like anxiety, and reading it, you do feel that because like, you're like, what is going on? And, and then, so, and there's just all these domestic scenes where like, this other wife of another union guy who got disappeared comes over and wants to commiserate. And Eilish like hates this chick and has always hated this chick. But like, she's like, fuck, I kind of have to be nice to her, I guess. 'Cause we're both in the same situation. And, it's just like all these little kind of interactions. And, for me, like, I don't feel like it's that dystopian because I think we are actually not that far from this stuff. Like when you look at like, oh, hey, Alabama Supreme Court just said IVF freaking frozen embryos are children. And if you destroy them, you can be prosecuted for murder. Like, I think we're like one step away from the union guys get disappeared, actually. Like, I am worried about it. And so...
Well, I think that's the point. I think it is supposed to be like, this is like tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It feels like tomorrow. And, it feels like what happened, like, I think about all the time, like when you whether you're looking at pictures of Gaza, you're looking at Ukraine, you're looking at whatever, the kids are wearing the same clothes my kids wear. They are doing the same things that you do. What they were like, I was watching this video of like Israeli soldiers with like Gazan guys with their hands tied behind their back. And they're like yelling at them, like, what were you doing on October 7th? And the guy's like, I worked in a furniture store, and it's like, what is that life? And like, how does it not resonate with people that like these people were just working in a freaking furniture store. And now all of a sudden they're being round up and like made to be refugees and their apartment building just got blown up. Like, how do you live your life? You still have those like domestic responsibilities. Like, where do we find diapers? And like, my kid, is thirsty. And like, it must just be like psychically just debilitating. And I think he deserves all the awards because no one's writing this stuff really, like, and what's awesome about it too, is it's like set in Ireland, which is like very recognizable for any Western culture. And you're like, oh, Ireland, like that's where the, leprechauns come from. And you go and drink beer, and it's like, so, it's just like this amazing contrast of like, it could never happen in Ireland, but I'm sure there are people who are like, it could never happen in Kiev. Look at our awesome life, Yeah. And so I think it's great. Everybody should read it, but it's not an easy read. I think you have to, you meet it halfway for sure.
I think there are similarities to Earth Abides by George R. Stewart to everything we've been saying.
Is he responding to like McCarthyism with his dystopian?
It was published in 1949. So I think it's more of a response to World War II.
More like the Soviet growth and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So the situation, the book opens with a man, he gets a rattlesnake bite. He's up in the mountains. He's at his like family's fishing cabin by himself, totally alone. No, doesn't know, no, whatever. It's 1949. No cell
Right.
phones.
Can't exactly call for help.
Right. So he gets bitten by a rattlesnake and that gets really sick. But at the same time, he gets this other sickness. But like it passes. And so a few days later, he comes down out of the mountains and discovers there is nobody left.
Oh.
So he got this sickness that came through all of America and presumably the world.
The rattlesnake bite like saved him.
Yeah, the rattlesnake bite like counteracted the disease or whatever.
I like it.
So
yeah.
he's, maybe the only survivor. So he starts driving, right? He's in California. He's in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And he checks out California. He discovers like a handful of people. Like he's not the only survivor, but let's say it wiped out like 95% of the population.
Station 11 style.
Yeah. So he thinks he's kind of going to be the most successful survivor because he didn't witness all the death. He was up by himself. He wasn't as traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
He's also really blunt throughout of being like, I'm a pretty smart guy and I'm running into all these people who are like not intellectual geniuses.
Yeah.
And like he runs into a woman who's clearly surviving by using her body and, sleeping with the men and so that they don't, I don't know, destroy her,
yeah,
murder
whatever.
her.
Yeah.
So like he just runs into like a lot of questionable characters, which in reading it in this day and age, you're like, this is not all kosher. Like everything, he runs into like a Black community that has clearly like made themselves into a family. And like, it's not really bad what he says about them, but he's like, I don't want to stay with these people. You're just kind of like probably a little racist.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So anyway, the beginning of the book, he drives across the country. So the first half of the book is just him in like the first few months following
discovery mode.
Yeah. He drives to New York and he drives back and he's alone the whole time. Like he runs into people, but he's like, I don't really want to hang out with any of these people I'm running into.
Right.
And so then he goes back to the family home and just like sets up camp. And then at the end of the first section, he meets a woman who's like pretty cool and they end up getting together. So the second half of the novel is like them kind of like rebuilding civilization.
Oh, yeah.
So, like they have kids and then like another couple adults come through who also have some kids and they're like, oh, we like each other well enough. Let's build this community. So it's like, then you get 22 years into them building this community. And like, throughout it's like, what are the issues that you're going to run into? And like, how is the earth responding? So there are all these little interstitials like, this is what happened to the cattle. There was this whole thing with rats. Like, this is what happened to the rat community. Like, this is what happened, so you go through all like the different animals. Yeah. I feel like you would love this.
Well, I'm laughing because it's, I've told this story before, but that World Without Us book, remember that?
Yes.
Oh my God. Someone gave it to me and it's like, it's supposed to be like this amazingly researched, like what would happen if humanity disappeared? And it's like all the obvious shit. It's like,
yeah,
the buildings would eventually fall down.
Right. See, this would be
the grass would
much
grow
more
really high.
Enjoyable read. It's like the same thing, but
right.
this one's like kind of fun.
Out in 1949 person. I can't believe someone greenlit that book. It still blows my mind.
Yeah. So it's just, you start reading it and you're like, wait, I've read this book before because like it's Station 11. It's there's a new Peter Heller book coming out. I think it's called Burn. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about two guys who go camping in Acadia and like come out from camping and everybody's
coast to Maine action. All right.
A little Maine
Let's
action.
Go.
And they come out of the woods and nobody's left. Right. It's The Stand. Like,
it's the road. Yeah.
It's the road. Exactly. I'm reading this book and I'm like, it's the road. It's The Stand. But this one was written for like,
I was about to say, you get credit for writing it in 1949.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a really, because I also started it thinking like, wow, this is a 400-page book. How are we going to write 400 pages about this guy all by himself?
Right.
But then it's, ultimately it's really about like, how do you rebuild civilization with just like a handful of people?
Interesting. All right. I'm into that book. Why did you read this? Is it a re-release or something?
So interestingly, I recall looking at jacket covers when I was leaving Houghton Mifflin Harcourt because they had the rights and I don't know if the rights were reverting or what was happening. But they were like, okay, we're going to like put this new cover on and redo this book. So I was in Cincinnati and I got to day 3 and I'd really hit my limit with people and education sessions and whatnot and being in that conference center. And I took a lift to a bookstore called Downbound Books, which I had heard about as being like very highly curated, like a pretty small space and just kind of beautifully done. So I wanted to check it out. So I was perusing their shelves and this book just kind of called to me. Like I
jumped right out.
I was like, you can't go into a bookstore without buying a book.
True.
A bookseller. So like I have all these books that I picked up at the conference. I have plenty of plane reading.
Short, yeah.
But I wanted to support the bookstore. So I was like, what do I want to read on the plane? And I took this book to the counter and the woman working there was like, oh, I'm so excited you're reading this. Like I read this in college. It's amazing. I love this book. So yeah, so I started reading on the plane home.
I like it. Nice work. So Crook Manifesto. Don't really have a good transition there.
It doesn't really fit with the rest of our books here, but that's okay.
I mean, it's fundamentally about how we organize ourselves and like, what's kosher in society. Okay. So first of all, I'm a little bit surprised that, like Harlem Shuffle was a big book, right? Like yes. People liked that book, right?
I didn't, but everyone else did. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. But I feel like it like was well received and it's like, oh, Harlem Shuffle,
Yes. Got very good reviews and sold well.
Right. And Crook Manifesto is a like sequel to it. It's written with the same characters. It's written in the same way. It's just continuing the story. It's like, it's not different. It's not a different type of book. Like it could have been like volume 2 or whatever. And I feel like it was kind of a dud or whatever, but like I liked it just as well. I thought it was just as fun. I thought like it has really interesting characters. It asks us really interesting questions about, why the Black community in Harlem is the way it is, about, what I think is interesting about this universe that Colson Whitehead has created is that it basically doesn't engage with the white community at all, right? So it is all in Harlem, right? And I think a lot of contemporary discourse is like this idea that like the Black community is like united against like the world or whatever, and like really simplistically. And Whitehead goes in there and he's like, every community is messy. Every community has people who, want to seize power, and every community has people who have to sort of make decisions for themselves about what they're okay with. And that's, there's like the Crook Manifesto title comes from just like this little line from one of the characters who's like, yeah, I do things, but I don't do that. Like Crook Manifesto, and it's like everybody has their limit, right? Like, I will burn down empty apartment buildings, but I won't burn down apartment buildings with people in them. I will, steal from these people, but I will not steal from these people. And it's like the code ultimately makes sense, and like you can still see people as good, even though they are doing illegal or shady or terrible things. And the main character, owns this furniture store, and he's like the first generation to go to college, first generation to make anything of himself, And
it's set in the 70s?
It's like 3 little vignettes, like 71, 73, and 75. Like it like kind of moves forward into the 70s. Last one was like late 60s. So, a lot of like the like Summer of Love stuff is over, and we're like moving into like the disco 70s and that kind of stuff. And it's all, streets of Harlem. And so, it like he has this like sheen of respectability around him. Like he's a businessman and he owns this furniture store, and his wife is, campaigning for the local alderman, and, but like the way, I actually won't give it away, but, like there, under every like rug of respectability is the dirt and grime of like how you got there. And it's cool to see him kind of come around to like, I'm a bad guy, I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy, I'm a good guy, and just sort of, constantly grappling with what his own manifesto is.
Yeah.
And I just think Colson Whitehead's like an amazing writer. Like, he does these really interesting things with like chapter transitions where like you get like an overlap of scenes. Like, you don't get the whole scene again, but you get like 5 minutes of the scene again. And like just enough to tell you that the perspective is switched, but like you see it just like, it's like the camera just like shot to the other side of the room and rewound 5 minutes and then goes forward again.
Yeah.
So you don't have like I do get kind of, you were talking about whatever book that was last time around where like it was Kelly Lynch. You got the same scene like almost too many times. Like, I really don't like that. It's like, I already know what happened. And like, I can figure out what these other people's motivations were, but this one is just like, it's just enough to like help you understand and orient yourself. And I think a sentence.
As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, that sounds like Kelly Link.
Yeah.
What you're saying does remind me of Earth Abides, because the guy, the main character Ish, is constantly like, now that they've got a community going, it's like, what is like a good civilization, right? And like, as they start to think, like, there are probably some other communities that have, sprung up across the world, that there have to be other survivors if we've survived. And he keeps questioning, like, but they might not have like kept to the same, standards that we did, because I'm a smart guy and like I'm with good people.
Yeah, well, it seems like there's a little sheen of like Nietzschean Superman fascism to our main character.
There's some things that are like not really okay, but he's like very blunt about like, this person's not really that smart, but he's good because he's strong and he builds things. It's like,
okay, Bob.
And there's some like, they do some like bull dodging for fun. So it was like, well, the bull's tired now, and so now it's okay for the girl, and now it's ready for the girl to play, because the girls can't handle the full strength bull. It's like, well, okay, screw you, buddy.
As we know. All right. Well,
anyway,
that's a good selection we had this week.
Totally good.
Yeah,
I need to read some other Colson Whitehead. When I read Harlem Shuffle, I just felt kind of confused a lot about what was going on. Like,
I mean, I think you have to immerse yourself. You have to immerse yourself in the universe quite a bit, and there is a lot of.
You just got to roll with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not so much the slang as it is like, I mean, if you grew up in the suburbs amongst a bunch of white people, it is disorienting. Like, now it's the exact opposite. It's, city, everybody on top of each other, everybody's black, everybody, is operating under just a completely different worldview. But I think we talked about that with Harlem Shuffle, is that one of the best things that he does is demonstrate the difference of living in America as a black person without constantly being like, see this here, right here, this is one of those differences, right? Like, you just sort of experience it with them, like the general, like there's this whole little vignette about like the Harlem version of Kick the Can that they played as kids. Right. And it's like very recognizable as the Kick the Can that we played, but it's like among the cars, and it goes on for days. And it's, it's just like that slightest bit different or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like orients you like, this is how kids grow up. It's different. Like there are no trees. You don't hide in the woods, like it's I don't know. It was just, there's like a lot of like little parts of that. Just the way that they interact with, people of power, and the way that they're constantly sort of maneuvering, it's just different. And I just think, so many of these books that are, you read them and you feel like you're being lectured to, or they're didactic. I feel like you learn way more from this book about what it was actually like at that time and in that place, without being told like, And now you have filled up your cup of goodness by reading this, you know? It's
Right.
just-
No, I appreciate that so much more. Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be.
exactly. It's just like,
lectured.
show me, you know,
Right.
like, let me see it. Don't tell me about what I'm looking, you know, and I think that's actually what he's the best at, that classic trope or whatever, the show me, don't tell me. Like, he's
Right.
just always showing me. Like, I never feel like I'm being told. Like, something is always happening, and like, I can always see what's going on. And like, I just feel like really present all the time.
That's awesome. Those great little way to sum it up.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have to catch a plane. I
I do.
know. So we will wrap this up. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully, we have oriented you a little better with our agenda of the books that we were going to talk about. That is a new innovation here in episode 61. If you have any other recommendations for new and different innovations as you're listening to our podcast, please send us a note at staff@realbookshop.com. I think that is our email address.
Info@realbookshop.com.
Maybe it's info@realbookshop.com.
We should probably know our email address. But,
Hannah@realbookshop.com will
yikes.
work. You know, that's a good one. Sam@realbookshop.com. That will also reach us. Judging by our YouTube analytics, you're not even listening, so it doesn't matter
Yeah.
what email address we give out.
You haven't heard this. Okay, we gotta go.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will see you next time.